We are going to be discussing the role or the potential role that Meta, the metaverse, can potentially play in financial services. And for that privilege, I'm happy to welcome Radhika Sikhin to the stage. Thank you, Radhika.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Radhika Sikhin. I know it's almost the last session, and it's been a long day, long 2 days with lots of information and panel conversations. But I hope I can hold your attention for a little while longer. The good news is that I am discussing quite a dynamic topic. I'm going to be discussing the metaverse. Nothing I say is definitive because it's ever evolving. And just a disclaimer that I used to work for Meta, so any of these views are actually my personal views and not those of Meta or Facebook for that matter. So to begin, I'm going to just try and level set because it is a fairly new topic. I'm going to throw up a very general definition of the metaverse, go through some terminologies that are associated in the space, and actually some of these terminologies have been spoken about throughout the PIPC. I'm going to share a little bit of use cases and potential opportunities, and then talk about some of the emerging regulatory frameworks that are in this space. So the metaverse is thought of as the next iteration of the internet. It's a 3D immersive experience facilitated by augmented reality and virtual reality. Now, what is virtual reality? Virtual reality, very simply, is simulations. It's like when pilots go and test themselves in a simulation. It is the same thing. It feels real. You believe you're actually in that space. So it's a very believable experience. Now, this is overlaid by augmented reality, which brings the visual displays, the sound and sensory stimuli through holographic technology. And when I say holographic technology, most of you will know that most people that interact in these digital worlds create a digital representation of themselves. Those are called avatars. But what makes an avatar really real is the headsets that you put on. The headsets pick up your expressions, it picks up your eye movement, it picks up your hand movement. And so you actually feel that you are physically present in these digital worlds. Now, the idea of the metaverse is to connect people anywhere, anytime, and continuously. And I emphasize continuously because initially when the thinking around the metaverse came about, people considered it to be a perpetual and persistent world. And if you think a little bit about that, that's quite scary. The concept of the metaverse has been around for a while. The word actually comes from a 1994 science fiction novel called Snow Crash, authored by Neil Stephenson. Now, he envisaged a dystopian world where people could engage through avatars, and it was, as I mentioned, perpetual in its place. It was mainly for people who wanted to escape the realities of their normal and mundane lives. Now, you'll say, well, that happened in 1994. Why is everyone talking about it now? Well, I think Meta, Facebook, has a whole lot to do with it. So in 2021, Mark Zuckerberg announced that Facebook was going to change its name to Meta, and that we were going to actually build the metaverse. And for any of you who know anything about Facebook, the moment we announce something, all the regulators and policymakers kind of freak out and start rushing to try and regulate us or make sure that we behave ourselves appropriately. So in 2021, Meta actually invested $10 billion just in the first year into building the metaverse. But they also acquired Oculus VR, which is the headsets that you are seeing on the screen there. They also created a metaverse world called Horizon Worlds. In Horizon Worlds, you can game, you can socialize, but you can also have meetings with one another. So we generally had our team meetings in Horizon Worlds, in a virtual reality world. And at the same time, they also went into a joint venture with Ray-Bans. They created something called Smart Ray-Bans. So when you put the Ray-Bans on, it can record or take photos of anything that you're doing. So if you're walking in the park, it can record that, it can take photos of you with your kids, and you can upload that into your social media app. So these were blocks of building the metaverse. Now, one of the things that seems to flow quite thematically when you're thinking about the metaverse is the idea of decentralization. So the idea of not having a single authority deal with this. And in addition to that, the principles that run through the conversation around the metaverse is openness, interoperability, portability. But I think the one thing that I do want to emphasize, the thinking is that this will be consumer centric and that the power will now reside in the hands of the consumer. Also closely related to this is the idea of Web3. Now, Web 1 was read only. Web 2 was where the platforms like Facebook or Google actually pushed content to you and you engaged with the content. But Web 3, the thinking is that the content will be controlled by the consumer. So the power of content moves away from the platforms into the hands of the consumer. Again, the theme of moving the power into the consumer's hands. Then the other area, the other topic is decentralized finance that has been discussed during this conference quite a lot. But that's the idea of providing financial services like lending, investing, the exchange of crypto assets without a central intermediary through the use of distribution ledger technology. Then the thinking is also that it would be blockchain that actually supports the metaverse or powers the metaverse. Now, again, as I said to you, this is evolving conversations. Nothing is definitive at this point. But I think there is a shift in thinking that it cannot only be blockchain based. And that it actually might be a combination of things. For those of you, most of you already know blockchain technology simply means an immutable record of information or transactions. And then the one thing that I've not heard being discussed actually here in the last 2 days is the concept of non-fungible tokens. Now, by its very definition, non-fungible means it's not replaceable or substitutable, and that it is unique. It's basically tokenized assets that come through blockchain technology, and it brings with it property rights and smart identities. Speaking of smart identities, I think that is going to be really key in the metaverse. And if you're really thinking of it from a financial services regulation point of view, trying to understand who you are dealing with, identifying and verifying credential of users is going to be quite critical. And I just want to say at this point, I'm probably going to leave you with more questions than answers, but this is why it's an evolving conversation. So here I've tried to map out some of the players in the space. This list is not exhaustive. And just to be clear, Meta is not the only player in this. The thinking is that companies will come together and build this new digital world. But to give you a sense, to date, Meta has spent at least $36 billion in investment. Xbox has spent $4 billion. Sony PlayStation has spent $5 billion. And Google bought Android for $50 billion. And that's just to pick a few. So this is by no means a small industry. And I can't go through all of this, but I do want to pull out a few that some of you might be quite familiar. So for those of you that have kids, you will know all the gaming ones, which is Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft. Your kids are already making you spend lots of money in that space. People are nodding their heads. The other big thing to come out is virtual real estate. There's a big demand for virtual real estate. I know that sounds strange, but the two big ones that I would pick out here is Sandbox, which has Sandbox Land. You can also buy and sell digital assets in Sandbox, and you can play games. Decentraland is where a lot of celebrities are buying virtual land. And here locally, we have Ubuntu, which MTN Nedbank has invested in this space. From a decentralized point of view, we have the Ethereum platform that most of you know. Most tokens, cryptocurrencies are built on the Ethereum platform and technology. And going back to the non-fungible tokens, the NFT part, one of the biggest marketplaces is actually OpenSea. On OpenSea, you can create, you can mint, you can list, and you can sell your non-fungible tokens via digital wallets. Now, one interesting one that I want to pick up, and it's not necessarily financial services related, is something called Second Life. Now, this is a metaverse that was created in 2003. It literally mimics society as you know it. So lots of very well-off people created avatars, went into Second Life and created literally a second life. They bought land, they engaged with their friends through avatars. You can golf there, you can bank there, you can have a whole life outside of your own real life. And that has existed, that was created by Linden Labs, and it is powered through a closed loop token called the Linden Dollar. Now, the reason I mentioned a few of these is because you will see it will come through in the rest of the presentation. From cloud technology perspective, you can see AWS is topping the list together with Google Cloud. Now, what are the financial services use cases that are already in existence? So the big one is subscription-based virtual experiences, advertising, sponsorships, branding. Commerce, for me, will probably be the biggest revenue stream for banks and fintechs and the like, and obviously the buying of virtual real estate. In addition, obviously, you can do such things like trading, crypto assets and virtual assets, payments, investments, etc. Now, I've just picked out a few examples of who's playing in the space. HSBC has bought land in Sandbox Land. They use this virtual bank branch to engage with customers that are sports enthusiasts. And I am of the understanding that Nedbank uses their Ubuntu piece of land to actually push content on their Nedbank Golf Challenge. Then you have JP Morgan, which bought land in Decentraland. They created a lounge called Onyx. It's like a mini mall. Their customers that entered the space engaged with their blockchain technology products and any new innovations. Linden Labs, which I mentioned, that created Second Life. We have Saxos, which is a Danish investment bank that has a branch within Second Life. And then Kia AI, which is a platform in India, they created something called Kia Metaverse. So the idea there is that avatars are relationship bank managers that engage with their customers on bespoke and customized solutions for them. They plan to extend this further to have more AI-driven customer experiences and to also bring in portfolio and wealth management in the space. I think the main message here is the way you are going to be engaging with your customers going forward in this space is going to change, and you have to start thinking about how this will impact your business. But what are some of the more normal type of opportunities in the space? So I mentioned earlier, we will have to find bridges between the real world and the digital world. So on and off ramps are going to be really important going forward. I think it was Herman Singh yesterday that mentioned that 98% of payments is still done in cash. So if we are thinking that it is going to be digital currencies that power the metaverse, I don't think we can leave out that a large portion of the world still interacts in fiat. And how are we going to bring this? And probably on and off ramps is going to be the place to do it. You can also start to think about insurance for digital assets. If you're buying virtual real estate, maybe you want to think about mortgages, that you can offer mortgages to buy virtual real estate. And smart contracts are definitely going to be creating greater efficiencies for back office operations. Again, I want to bring back the idea of commerce. Herman also mentioned yesterday that payments follows commerce. We already have the likes of Gucci, Nike, and Louis Vuitton creating very unique and expensive accessories for avatars in this space. But you can also buy digital pets, skins, accessories. Actually, anything that you can buy in the real world, you can buy in the digital world. And McKinsey actually predicts that the commerce market will reach 5 trillion by 2030. So there's a lot of money to be made, people. But talking about how you can make money in this space, let's talk about what is going to power the metaverse, what means of exchange is going to be used. Now, all of these have already been discussed in various forms throughout the conference. But just to bring in a little bit, cryptocurrency, the most popular being Bitcoin. Now, both Decentraland and Sandbox Land are actually powered by cryptocurrencies that are built on the Ethereum platform. And MasterCard and PayPal have already started to engage with cryptocurrency, believing it to be a very pivotal, to play a very pivotal role in the future of payments. But the problem with cryptocurrencies and indeed stablecoins and CBDs is that there is no protocol or standards to create the cryptocurrency. So everybody's doing their own thing, creating it on their own blockchain, creating it in the way they like, which does not make it ubiquitous. And this is going to pose a challenge later on when you're thinking about international commerce and international trade. In addition, regulators have not really uniformly looked at this. So, for example, if you look at Nigeria, they have banned cryptocurrency in the formal sector. Yet, Nigeria has the largest amount of crypto asset users on the continent. And guys, I mentioned in the formal sector because you can actually still use cryptocurrencies in Nigeria, you just can't use it in the banking system. And then on the other hand, you have the Central African Republic that has made cryptocurrencies legal tender. Here in South Africa, we have not banned cryptocurrencies. Indeed, it has been declared a financial instrument, and financial services providers are licensed through the FICE Act. Just to explain what stablecoins is. Stablecoins is merely another type of cryptocurrencies. The difference is that it is backed by either reserves or underlying assets. Now, as someone that was actually part of the team that created the white paper on Libra and DM coins, this is very close to my heart. So I am going to say that when Facebook announced that it was going to create a global stable coin, use it to reduce the cost of remittance to zero across our family of apps, the entire global regulatory system stood up and started to look at us and rush to try and contain us, thinking of us as a very dominant player. And for that purpose, I take credit for all our team takes credit for all the conversations around this, because people would never have discussed cryptocurrencies, stablecoins, or CBDCs if it wasn't for us thinking about creating the DM and the Libra coin. But that said, there's still no uniform way of looking at stablecoins. In the US, the Presidential Committee brought out a framework for overseeing stablecoins. It is not yet enacted, and there is still a lot of conversations around who would be the primary regulator in the space. The UK has brought out non-binding recommendations on how to oversee stablecoins. And at the forefront, I would say the EU in their markets in crypto asset regulation, which was enacted in June 2023, is probably at the forefront, and they particularly look at oversight of asset reference tokens as well as e-money tokens. And just to say that most recently, PayPal issued their own stable coin called PayPal USD that is pegged to the US dollar. In the same vein, a lot of discussions have been about central bank digital currencies. In one form or the other, over 100 central banks are looking at CBDCs. It's either in the pilot phase or in the research phase. They look at it from a wholesale perspective. In South Africa, you all know about the COCA project, or they are looking at it from a retail perspective. Nigeria is the one country I'd like to mention. They have issued the e-Naira in the retail space. Now, Nigeria, it is not without its issues, but they did launch it in a phased approach. So initially, they looked at digital wallets and asking banks to be the distributor of the e-Naira, but later they are starting to include merchants in the space, and it is taking time, but it is plodding along. Now, when I talk about tokens here, I'm not talking about deposited tokens that was mentioned yesterday. I do want to mention tokens that are in gaming apps. They tend to be closed loop. That means you can either buy or earn those tokens, but it is closed looped. It cannot be used outside of the game itself. It does not have a monetary value, or neither can it be redeemable. So to some extent, tokens are considered low risk. And as I mentioned earlier, in terms of fiat, we simply at this stage can't ignore it. We need to think about a hybrid situation. So there's a whole lot of laws and regulations that are raised there. I'm not going to speak to all of them, but I think it is important to point out that there is no holistic framework for the metaverse at this stage. Countries have simply looked at what was important for them and decided to adjust to the new digital world that is emerging. In most countries, they prioritized consumer protection. From a financial services point of view, virtual asset and crypto asset regulations were prioritized by central banks. And in some countries, they took significant steps to ensure that big tech did not take over any particular industry. At the forefront of these regulations, I would say, is the European regulations. I mentioned it earlier. For short, it's called MiCA. Now, MiCA covers the issuing and trading of crypto assets and virtual assets. And they look at authorization, they look at supervision, greater disclosure, and transparency. And in particular, they want to oversee what they call significant service providers. So basically, service providers who have 15 million or more subscribers. So they've taken a risk-based approach to this. But I think the most significant discussion to come out of the European dialogue was actually the dialogue around non-fungible tokens. Now, non-fungible tokens has a huge spectrum. It's just not one thing or the other. At the one end, non-fungible tokens are actually things that content creators use. So if you, for example, create a video, take photos, or create a song, then you go onto a platform, you digitize it, and then you sell it. You are merely trying as a creator to make a living. And then on the other hand, you have NFTs that look, feel, and smell like a financial instrument. So in the EU, the regulators wanted to put everything into one basket and try to put a one-size-fits-all. It didn't work. We advocated quite strongly that there should be a distinction between what creators do, which is digital collectibles, versus what an investment in NFT looks like. Now, an investment NFT, to give you an example, I don't know if many of you know this, I don't know if you know Bored Apes. So Bored Apes is 10,000 pictures of apes that were digitized and was sold. Now, when you think about 10,000, it has a very high value, but it actually creates a market. It creates a market because not only is it high value, it can be traded, it can be invested in, it can be used also in the context of anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. Now that is what an investment NFT kind of looks like. So in these conversations, we were saying to the regulator, if I take a photo, I digitize it and sell it, do you really expect Instagram to come and KYC me at that point because I sold one photograph? The answer is no. So in the end, the MiCA regulations settled in a place that we were quite happy with. They excluded digital collectibles, so it excluded content creators. But what they did include was large series and collections, like and is similar to what the Bored Apes example that I mentioned. And just to say that large has not yet been defined, but that will be left up to the securities regulator. So speaking of the securities regulator, yes, digital assets can be securities. In the US, they decide if a digital asset is a security by using the Howey test. The Howey test is, can the digital asset be invested? Can it make a profit out of it? And is it issued by a common enterprise? And if that's the case, then it is considered a security contract and therefore should be regulated by the securities regulator. In other jurisdictions, I have to say the tax regulator was faster than everybody else. They certainly saw the potential for a new revenue stream. So tax will be applied to commerce in the digital world, investments, as well as in-game purchases. I am well aware that here in South Africa, SARS expects you to declare your crypto asset and cryptocurrency holdings. And then to bring up AML CFT, which is generally one of my favorite topics, and some of you that are sitting in the audience, we know that here in South Africa that CASPs and VASPs are already considered obliged entities under FICA. FATF has issued guidance to countries on how to regulate and supervise VASPs and CAPs. They tended to focus more on the service or the activity and not the technology, which is fantastic. But in a recent assessment, they have declared that most countries are well behind in terms of implementing the VASP and CASP regulations. Closely related to AML CFT is the thinking around smart identities and digital identities. It is going to be really difficult, I think, going forward to be able to identify and verify who you're dealing with. And that is the absolute basis for AML CFT. Do you know who you are transacting with? Do you know this person? But just to say a little bit controversial conversation around this is maybe that when you are thinking about the digital world, you start to think beyond an ID or an address or a payslip, but you start to think about social data so that you can identify the person through who they interact with, where are they, what do they like, what do they eat. So taking that social data, combining with it with identity data, and that might make it a little bit easier to identify who you are dealing with. In a world where, if you think about it, a person can have different personalities, different avatars, it's going to be quite complex at the end of the day from a financial services perspective. And just the last point is that the EU has already updated their travel rule to include cryptocurrencies. Now, coming back to consumer protection, which I think a lot of countries have focused on, here the FSCA has already said that CASPs and VASPs will need to be authorized via FICE. And in so doing, they would also have to meet fit and proper requirements as well as general requirements. But I just want to point out that consumer protection is not just about fit and proper and general conduct. It goes way beyond that. It speaks to fraud, deceptive practices, being able to manipulate people in the digital world. And child safety is paramount. So your kids, when they are there, how do we protect them in that space? And sexual harassment is actually a real issue in the virtual world. Not so long ago, a lady claimed that she was sexually harassed in Horizon Worlds, which is the world that Meta created. So Meta put in a safety feature where you can activate a personal boundary around your avatar so no one can actually touch you. Now you're going to ask yourself, if you think about laws, what recourse did this woman have? Well, not really any, because laws have not been updated. She might have a civil case. But again, it's time for governments to start thinking about how these things are going to work in practice. And then I just want to mention, I'm going to try and group a few things together there in the interest of time. I think it's important to talk a little bit about data privacy, cybersecurity, and AI. As you know, the metaverse is data-driven, and a very large amount of personal information can be collected. Data privacy laws to date are not as advanced as we would like it to be. The main concern is data breaches, unauthorized access to data, fake profiles, manipulation of users. Today, in the normal world, cybersecurity, 80% of companies are dealing with cybersecurity issues. So you can only imagine that in the digital world, this will be heightened. We have Papaya here in South Africa, where the user needs to understand what information you are collecting. But if you really think about the metaverse and AI, you actually don't have a clue what AI is collecting on your behalf at that point in time. Now, in the EU, what they've done is they've started to rethink GDPR, which is their data privacy law. But in addition, they have supplemented this with something called the Digital Services Act, which looks at content moderation, so monitoring content on platforms, and the Digital Markets Act, which looks at companies that are gatekeepers. So this is more of a competition act. Basically, people like Google and Meta have been declared gatekeepers. This is closely linked to open banking and open finance. But the idea is that if you run a platform, you will not be allowed to choose the vendors that are in there. The platform should be open to all vendors and thereby allowing more competitive outcomes. And just a small point on issues of social exclusion and stereotyping. If the metaverse is made up of data, then the quality of the data is what's important. So what you put into the metaverse is what it's going to generate. So when you think about data that is already prejudiced, does not have the right quality, issues of racism, etc., just remember that these will be perpetuated in the metaverse and needs to be guarded against. Climate issues, I'm going to touch on this very quickly. As you can imagine, this requires a really huge amount of computing power, and for that reason, it has a very massive carbon footprint and something to be concerned about. And then lastly, I do want to quickly mention property rights, IP rights, trademarks, and patents. This will form the foundation of the metaverse. Property rights have not yet been updated to think about real estate, for example, in the metaverse. But at the forefront of this globally that I have seen is a consultation that happened last year in the UK by the Law Commission. They issued a 500-page document on property rights and in digital assets. Sadly, it was my task to go through that 500 pages of consultation and provide a response. I did not sleep for 2 weeks. But just to say that what was unique about the consultation is that they created a new category called data object. So it's neither a possession nor is it tangible. So a data object is made up of data. It's rivalrous, meaning that it's unlimited in use, and it doesn't belong to any legal ownership to a person or an institution. So for example, a cryptocurrency exists irrespective if I own it or if Geeta owns it or Kim owns it. It still exists in the space. Now, While that sounds all very academic, I think we still don't know how this will play out in the real world. And the thinking is that most of this will be worked out through actual court cases, and precedent will be set through the court. I mean, if you just quickly think about it, if you buy an NFT, you're buying a digital representation. If someone hacks it and takes it, or if I lose it, what recourse do I have? I don't actually own the underlying asset. So these are some of the things that will be still have to be worked through as we think about these new worlds that we are creating. And then in conclusion, I just want to bring it back home. What does this mean for us in South Africa or in Africa in general? As a backdrop, Africa is a very young demographic. We have a large amount of native digital users. We have a huge amount of fintech investments, and mobile is king in Africa. Deloitte estimates that our GDP in Africa will be improved by $40 billion by 2031, with Nigeria leading the pack and South Africa being second on the list. But while that all sounds really exciting, we have a really long way to go in Africa. For one thing, we have the digital divide. We have a lack of digital literacy. We have a lack of digital skills. Our infrastructure is not up to date. We have high data costs. And actually, the devices that are needed to enter the metaverse, like those headsets, are extremely expensive. For example, the Quest Pro 2 is 1,500 US dollars, and the Apple headset is 3,500 US dollars. Now, I don't know about you, but even I find that quite unaffordable. And I just have to say, purely by coincidence, Facebook, Meta will be announcing the Quest 3 today, actually. So it is going to be interesting to see what it costs. They have been thinking quite a lot about making it more accessible. But what do we do then to try and harness that $40 billion that Deloitte is talking about? And I'm not going to say anything that you haven't already heard before. It is really up to government to start to collaborate with the private sector to construct a holistic approach. In the EU, they've already drafted a report on the metaverse, clearly identifying areas that they need to adjust, amend, or do better to ensure that the EU is innovative and are not missing out. On the other spectrum, you have someone like the UAE who's absolutely welcomed the idea of the metaverse. They have a metaverse strategy. They are doing everything in their power to bring tech companies to the UAE so that they are the innovation hub of the region. Indeed, their actually Department of Economics has a office in the metaverse already, and that's the same with Saudi Arabia. So at the end of the day, I think it is important to facilitate investment-friendly policies that result in better mobility, better mobile connectivity, and cheaper data. If Africans can't afford the head devices, we need to think about bringing the metaverse through mobile. We already all almost have one or maybe three mobile devices in our hands. How about bringing these worlds through mobile? That is something to think about. In addition, governments can try and create principle-based frameworks that foster innovation, promote interoperability, portability, and even start to consider decentralized systems. The private sector has already started to think about this. They have created something called the Metaverse Standard Forums that quite a few of the in the second slide that I mentioned belong to, and they want to advance an open and interoperable metaverse globally. Now, while you may think this all sounds really far away, I'm going to share a video now very quickly to show you how quick the technology is changing, and then you are free to ask me any questions. So if I can ask you to please play the video. Sound.
This is so great. Lighting change? Wow.
Yeah, we can put the light anywhere.
And it doesn't feel awkward to be really close to you.
No, it does. I moved you back a few feet before you got into the
Well,
headset. You were like right here.
I don't know if people can see this, but this is incredible. The realism here is just incredible. Where am I? Where are you, Mark? Where are we?
You're in Austin, right?
No, I mean this place. We're shrouded by darkness with ultra realistic face, and it just feels like we're in the same room. This is really the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And sorry to be in your personal space.
I mean,
We have done jiu-jitsu before.
yeah, no, I was commenting to the team before that even that I feel like we've choked each other from further distances than it feels like we are right now.
I mean, this is just really incredible. I don't know how to describe it with words. It really feels like we're in the same room.
Yeah.
It feels like the future. This is
Yeah.
truly, truly incredible. I just wanted to take it in. I'm still getting used to it. It's like, it's you. It's really you. But you're not here with me, right? You're there wearing a headset, and I'm wearing a headset. It's really, really incredible. So what can you describe what it takes currently for us to appear so photorealistic to each other?
Yeah. So I mean, for background, we both did these scans for this research project that we have at Meta called Codec Avatars. And the idea is that instead of our avatars being cartoony, and instead of actually transmitting a video, what it does is we've sort of scanned ourselves and a lot of different expressions, and we've built a computer model of sort of each of our faces and bodies and the different expressions that we make, and collapse that into a codec that then when you have the headset on your head, it sees your face, it sees your expression, and it can basically send an encoded version of what you're supposed to look like over the wire. So in addition to being photorealistic, it's also actually much more bandwidth efficient than transmitting a full video, or especially a 3D immersive video of a whole scene like this.
And it captures everything, like the flaws, like to me, the subtleties of the human face, like even the flaws, that's all amazing. It makes it so much more immersive. It makes you realize that like perfection isn't the thing that leads to immersion. It's like the little subtle flaws, like freckles and like variations in color and just
wrinkles,
all stuff
asymmetry.
About noses, asymmetry, and just the different, like the corners of the eyes, like what your eyes do when you smile, all that kind of stuff.
So just to show that it's already moved from cartoon avatars to like almost feeling and seeing the person right next to you. I apologize for speaking so long. Does anybody have any questions, or are you? Oh wait, there's the Slido. Okay, so somebody's asking about Meta's priorities. Yes, I have to agree that the metaverse conversation has cooled off a little bit. And this is very much because of what investors in Meta want. AI, yes, has become the priority, but the metaverse, as you just saw, this was 2 weeks ago, by the way, with Lex Friedman, is still very much a priority, generally speaking, but you can't divest the conversation around AI from the conversation around the metaverse. They're extremely closely linked. Do the US set a register digital asset for the international mode? Does each country register its own? No, so there isn't a uniform way of. Actually, I have not actually seen a register for digital assets. I think each country is doing it in their own way. The question was, does the US set or register digital assets for the international markets? Does each country register their own? As I was saying, I don't think that there is a global register. I think each country is doing it on its own. I know here in South Africa, VASP and CAS do have to register both with FICA and with FICE, with the FCSA. So no, I don't think there's a global registry. So somebody else asked, did you, you listed climate and sustainability as part of laws and regulations. Can you provide an example of how such items are regulated in the metaverse? No, those items are not regulated in the metaverse. I think that is something that should be a priority, especially for climate proponents. What I do know is that at least someone like Ethereum are very cognizant of the large carbon footprint that even creating one NFT takes. So they've been looking at protocols where they can batch certain computing in order to create a smaller carbon footprint. But to be honest, to date, well, at least to my knowledge, I don't know of any laws and regulations that are regulating that space. Any other questions?
Thank you very much, Radhika. That was insightful. I'm already seeing some business opportunities in the payment space. Thanks, everyone, for joining this session. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.